Two of the, I think it's safe to say from what I've read about you guys, two of the leading luminaries of parkour, the art and science here in New York City. And I think, Max, you brought some videos to show. We all set up and ready to go?
Yeah.
All right.
I think we're ready.
All right, so let's and I think you're going to give us a kind of intro into the sort of the history and the mindset of parkour.
Yep. If it's okay, I'm just going to stand because I have restless leg stuff all the time from all this training. I'm just curious, like before we start, just to kind of get an idea of how much you guys know about parkour or whatever. If you've heard of it, just raise your hand if you've heard of it. I mean, obviously, I know there's a few people here. One thing that's really hard with parkour is coming up with a concrete definition. So what I like to do when I'm talking to people about parkour is kind of getting their input, and then I actually have a video prepared. This is these two guys that they live in Cambridge, England. Two of, if not the best parkour practitioners in the world, definitely two of the leading practitioners in the world. And this is really my favorite kind of video to show people, to explain parkour from my perspective and not just kind of to say, you know, to give the definition in words. So.
How are you getting back? did they not let you go on? Oh.
And I don't know if anybody actually still knows how he got back. So that's the video I kind of like to use to introduce parkour. It's hard a lot of times for me to try and tell people exactly what it is in words, because it's, in a lot of ways, it's kind of like trying to explain a foreign language to somebody. Parkour is really like a language using movement. And you know, if somebody asks you, you know, oh, well, like, what is Spanish, what is French, what is a language, you can explain it to them, but they don't really understand it until they hear it and are immersed in it themselves. So I think video really is the best medium for getting an understanding of parkour. But whatever your definition is that you use with parkour, whether it's, you know, moving quickly, through an environment, being an urban ninja, it all kind of started in the same place, and all these definitions have really common roots. So what I want to tell you is it started essentially in the early 20th century with a man named Georges Hébert, who was a French naval officer, and he was stationed on the island of Martinique, and I believe the year was 1916, a volcano exploded, and it was his job to get 700 civilians off of the island into safety as quickly as he possibly could. And what he noticed was that in this group of civilians, some of these people were French colonists and some of these people were natives. And he noticed these colonists were moving really rigidly. They had no kind of experience in any of these situations. And the natives were by far the front of the pack. They were moving so easily, better than some of the soldiers through the terrain. So he got to thinking why that would be, and eventually created something that he called la méthode naturelle, or the natural method. And it consisted of kind of 12 fundamental human movement capacities. You have swimming, running, jumping, throwing, climbing, balancing, moving on all fours. I don't know if I think I said swimming, self-defense. There's 12 of them. I don't remember all of them. But he came up with this and introduced it into some French kind of school programs and also into the military. And in the mid-20th century, 1940s, 1950s, the French military took the natural method and adopted it as their method for training soldiers. It definitely got a lot of play in the early to mid-20th century. And after it got picked up by the military, it was used extensively in Vietnam, which is where Raymond Bell, who is the father of the kind of accepted father of parkour. So he is parkour's grandfather, essentially. Raymond Bell learned the natural method, brought it back from the war with him, and taught it to his son David Bell. And David Bell took what he learned, those kind of 12 fundamental capacities for movement, and applied it to the cityscape, because he lived in this place called Nice, which is a suburb of Paris. Nice and Évry are not the nicest places, especially when he was growing up. They were kind of very urban, kind of ghetto areas. And so him and his friends would play these different games in areas, but all they had was, they had these really, really steep brick walls. They didn't have the kind of opportunities that people here would have with these, soft, cushy playgrounds. So between the play that David and his friends had and his kind of basis in the natural method, he created, along with this kind of ethos that his father gave him about becoming stronger and always kind of testing your limits, he created this method that he called eventually parkour, which was, the goal was to be able to move through any environment, not just urban or natural, combining both the natural method and what he'd kind of learned playing in the streets, to be able to move through any environment as quickly and efficiently as you can. And he combined that with a philosophy that was passed down from natural method, which is in French, être fort pour être utile, which is to be strong, to be useful. So obviously when Georges Hebert was creating the natural method, his goal was to create functional strength, to create functional athletes like the people, the tribesmen that he'd seen in Africa, and like the people in Martinique. And he'd seen too many athletes when he went back to France that had strong muscles but couldn't do anything with it. And he saw it when he was evacuating these people, soldiers that were almost as useless as the civilians. So his goal was to always create functional strength, to be strong, to be useful. And David took this and applied it to parkour in the urban environment. So his goal was to have that training mindset from MoveNat natural method, but be able to apply it to any circumstance. And another thing that David tacked on that also kind of moved down from the natural method was philosophy être duré, which is to be and to last. So something that Georges Hebert and David both kind of saw was that it's easy to burn out when you're training sports like parkour, when you were doing the natural method. It's easy to say, okay, I need to do so many jumps or take so many drops so that in a certain situation I'll be prepared. But if you can't do that anymore by the time you're 25, what use is it? Maybe you need to have these skills at the age of 40, maybe you need to have them at the age of 50. So they came up with this idea of to be and to last, where you're not only training functional strength, but you're also training to have that strength for as long as you possibly can. And it also applies to your mind, where you want to train your mind to be strong, and also to train your mind so that these skills, even if you don't have the same physical skills when you're aging, you can still use the skills that you have in an efficient way and be able to kind of judge these situations. It originated, David kind of started messing around with his friends in the 90s. By 2000, they had some videos on the internet that got a lot of play in France. They were on some local TV stations in France. A big-time director, Luc Besson, who has directed District B13. I don't know if any of you guys have seen it. It's a French action film that featured David Bell as the leading actor and was basically loosely structured around parkour. It wasn't much of a story, but it has a lot of really good action in it. And he found these kids and wanted to kind of bring their sport and their lifestyle and this movement that they created to the world. So through him, there were a few movies, Yamakasi, which was about David's group of friends that he trained with, and also District B13. These kind of brought parkour to the international attention, and people started picking it up in England. There were 2 documentaries in England that got a lot of people started, Jump London and Jump Britain. And that's one of the reasons why, you know, these 2 guys in England both started watching one of those documentaries, Jump Britain, I think it was. And that's one of the reasons that England actually is one of the top communities in the world today, is because those documentaries got picked up there first, so they've been doing it longer than most of the other people in the world outside of France. And then once those 2 documentaries came out, they got online, people started picking it up in the US, South America. It's really big in Eastern Europe as well. There's a big scene in Russia, really big in Asia as well, until, you know, China's whole YouTube thing has kind of stopped that from spreading as much. But what's really interesting is actually people that are smuggling these Chinese parkour videos out of China and onto YouTube so that they can stay connected with the rest of the world.